Welcome to our revenge episode of r/Pro Revenge. Today, we're going to tell you what happens when an entitled mother stumbles upon a true revenge genius. This happened earlier today and it was just too perfect not to share with you. The location is somewhat peculiar. The house is on top of a hill, 250 feet high, accessible only by a trail. All of our materials have to be manually carried along this trail, which is a real headache. Carrying an entire house uphill is an exhausting task. But thank God, we have 2 parking spaces on the street, at the bottom of the hill, with official no parking signs. Unfortunately, there's an elementary school about half a block away, and the kids' parents seem to think it's okay to park in our spaces. I consider myself a reasonable person, so if someone is parked in the spaces and there isn't a delivery or need to park a truck, I'll let it go. But if there's no one parked there and I need the spaces, I politely ask them to move. Most often, people do this right away. However, today I received a call from the timber delivery truck that was on its way to our location. The driver said he would be there in about 2 or 3 minutes. I told him I would meet him on the street and make sure there was a parking spot. After all, he was hauling all the materials for the roof of our house, which is a bulky load of lumber that would take at least an hour to move uphill. Naturally, I didn't want him parked in the middle of the street, in danger, for an hour when we had a perfectly available parking spot for him. As I started down the hill, I noticed that there was a mother from school sitting in her car, presumably waiting to pick up her son. I approached the car and politely informed her that she had parked in a no-go zone and we needed her to clear the space to park the delivery truck. She mocked me and rudely replied, "I'll only be a few minutes and your truck hasn't arrived yet. Relax." Before I could respond, a huge lumber truck appeared around the corner. I waved at the driver and then pointed at the truck, trying to get the attention of the woman in the car, who had now rolled down her window to ignore me. I put on my best customer service smile and waved again. She opened the window halfway and screamed angrily. At that moment, the truck pulled up beside the car and I politely asked her once more, in a firmer tone of voice, for her to move the vehicle, reminding her that she was illegally parked in a tow zone. And then, she had a brilliant idea. She said, "You can just unload there." My God, it wasn't that difficult. I smiled again and walked away, a brilliant plan forming in my mind. I instructed the delivery guy to park as close to it as possible and block it off with the portable toilet that was at one end of our reserved spot, while the car parked next to it occupied the other side. The driver smiled as he immediately understood what I was trying to do. He deftly blocked this lady and her car, turning the 2 parking spaces into a small prison. We untied the wood and my team began hauling the materials up the hill. In the meantime, I called the traffic police to inform them about the situation. At that point, I wasn't trying to get her in trouble, I just wanted to have a record of why we were blocking part of the street, to avoid getting in trouble with the city. The traffic police officer was very friendly and advised that he would be there in about 30 minutes to deal with the situation. Wonderful! As we continued unloading the wood, the woman's son appeared. And guess what? His mother was unable to get out through the driver's door because the lumber truck was parked too close. She clumsily climbed into the car and staggered out the passenger door, glaring at me and the truck driver. She took her son and then realized there was no way out. Furious, she came towards us and said, "I'm in a big hurry. You need to move this truck right now so I can leave." Before I could respond, the driver smiled and said, "Sorry ma'am, but to unload the wood from the truck, we need to untie it. According to our company policy, I cannot move the truck with loose cargo. I'm sorry." This situation led his blood pressure to reach almost aneurysmal levels. Meanwhile, I could barely contain my laughter. Her face was priceless. At that moment, to our surprise, a traffic police officer arrived and parked behind the truck. She didn't realize the officer was coming, and before he could even get out of the vehicle, I casually said, "Couldn't you just go around? It's not that hard." With the biggest smirk I've ever had, I watched as she realized she'd gotten herself into trouble. She screamed angrily, hurried back to the car and angrily climbed in through the passenger door, jumping into the driver's seat. At that moment, the officer was closing in on me and the driver, and before she could introduce herself, the mother in the car backed up and floored the accelerator, colliding with the portable toilet and knocking it over. Then she tried to climb the curb and drive on the sidewalk. The officer promptly approached the car and ordered her to get out. My favorite part of all of this was seeing the shocked expression on her face when she realized that she had just done all this in front of a police officer. She was handcuffed when the traffic officer called for support, and was promptly placed on the same curb that she tried to pass. Sitting on the curb, she was screaming at the now two police officers, complaining that we told her she could stay there and that we never asked her to move. The traffic cop replied that she was the one who was initially called when she refused to leave, and that she knew very well what was going on. While the driver and I made a report to the second officer, my colleagues finished moving the rest of the wood. The driver finished his statement and returned to the garage. At the end of that ordeal, she was arrested and charged with child endangerment, reckless driving, destruction of property, the portable toilet, and driving with a suspended license. On top of that, her car was towed. Meanwhile, the son has been taken home by his grandmother, and she will be spending some quality time in a holding cell. I never expected her to actually take my advice to just go around the truck, but I think next time she'll probably think twice about parking in a tow zone, if ever she gets her license back again. Oh, it's so beautiful. That's what happens when entitled parents need professional revenge. As I walked towards my gate at LAX airport, I noticed a woman whose dog was in the middle of doing its business. She was talking loudly on the phone with her back to the dog, so I assumed she hadn't noticed. This situation aroused indignation in the gentleman who tried to get her attention. "Sorry, miss," one of them said politely, pointing to the puppy in the poo. The woman rolled her eyes and looked back at his face, completely ignoring the man. She even yelled at her partner on FaceTime, with no hint of irony, "People are so rude." When her dog was finished, the woman started walking away, leaving everything on the airport floor. Another woman tried to stop her, saying, "Aren't you going to clean this up?" Surprisingly, she replied, shocked like the rest of us, "They have people for that." And she disappeared into the crowd, the way someone shouting into a telephone can disappear. I stayed close to the mound and warned people to go around it while someone got the attention of the maintenance crew. No one said anything. Everyone was so shocked that someone could be so horrible. When I got to my gate, the woman was there. Very good, I thought. We were both going to Tokyo. When I travel abroad, I feel ashamed of other Americans who do things 100 times less embarrassing than leaving animal feces on the airport floor. To make matters worse, her dog was now barking at everyone passing by. I have nothing against people traveling with their dogs, I do it often myself. But it is a privilege that I take seriously. My dog is well trained and better behaved than most people. He sure is better behaved than that dog whose owner looks like he has a butt for a head. Right there inside LAX is a designated pet area, just past security, just 2 gates away from where this killjoy let his dog enjoy. It didn't matter, she was the type of person to throw garbage 3 feet away from an empty trash can. As the dog barked at the world, the woman went from making a video call without headphones to listening to music without headphones. I don't like to use the word sociopath, but I can't find another way to explain how selfish and terrible it is. I was pretty sure her car would be parked in a long-term lot, taking up 3 spaces, with paint on the fender of the kid's bike that she hid, without leaving a note. Everyone tried to ignore it by sitting as far away from her as possible. But I'm not everyone. I sat right next to that horrible woman. "Are you going to London on business?" I asked. "I'm going to Tokyo," I replied. She snapped back, annoyed that I had interrupted her DJing. "Oh, I see," I said. "Then you better hurry. Gate has changed to 53. Look, this is the flight to London." I only intended to give her a little moment of panic as revenge for her terrible behavior towards everyone. I didn't foresee what would happen next. She grabbed her bags and her dog in a huff and stormed out of the gate without even checking. She was so wrapped up in herself that she didn't realize the monitor at our gate still showed Tokyo. And almost everyone at the gate was Japanese, based on their actions. She wasn't stopped by anyone. It's so rude. The flight to Tokyo was at gate 69A, so gates 53 were on the other side of the next terminal. I felt guilty knowing that she had probably scolded some poor employee who had to explain that there was no gate 53. I don't know if she got back on that flight before we took off or not, but I didn't see her boarding and I didn't hear the barking of your dog. It wasn't my original intention for her to miss her flight, but it would be a good punishment for her to be so rude to everyone and make someone underpaid clean up the feces off the floor. It makes me wonder if we humans are related to apes, more or less. Everyone here is complete crazy. They've been fighting decades before my brother or I were born. Our property line is like a square, surrounded by roads on 2 sides. It is worth noting that on one part of the road we allow our neighbors to use 1 square meter of our land so that they can pass more safely without damaging our property. This information is crucial. This road goes over our fence. No one wanted to pay for the damage. Our fence, made up of bushes, trees and a metal fence, was completely destroyed, and the central part of the fence was bent. We had to replace the plants and put in a new metal fence. My father told me that this was not the first time this had happened, but the third. I couldn't believe it when I heard that. And that's how our professional revenge began. My father is a police officer, and one neighbor in particular threatened my father, saying he would shoot him in the back with a pickaxe. For a year these neighbors hid the barrel with their cars, and now the barrels are worthless. My father was furious and decided to change his petty revenge to a professional one. He got some wood to use as a mold. We buy sand and cement, as well as metal poles. On a quiet afternoon, we cemented that part of the land and put in the concrete fence. Now, I want to know your opinion in the comments. I would love to hear your suggestions. And if you like it, I have another story to tell. When I was a kid, our neighbors were the most rude. They always pestered us, insulted us, and littered our house. One of the things they used to do was knock down the wooden poles that we had on our lawn, the part that separated our houses. They would do this to the bumper of their SUV and drive across our lawn to get to the garage. My mother once lost her temper and said that my father would have to pay for the damage. My dad just smiled and said, "Sue me." And he went back into the house. That was our r/pro revenge. I wanted to thank everyone who is supporting my channel. So please keep supporting, leave your comments and suggestions. I look forward to reading what you guys have to say. And if you like it, I have more stories to share.